Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Podcast Unflooded. Today, we're joined by special guest swaggmasta. Do you want to introduce some of your content, the videos that you've done for those that may not know your channel?
Of course. My name's Swagmasta. My actual name is Colton. You can call me that if you're ever in the comments or whatever. I mostly make shorts, tangentially related to all sorts of Zelda content. Probably the video that most people know me by now is a timeline video that I made where I basically just made fun of the canon timeline and tried to make my own thing, which is arguably worse, but it was fun to do anyway.
Well, I'm so glad you made it, man. It's been I think I've said this, but to your face before, but like when I was a kid getting into like Zelda lore discussion, like for the first time, the big thing that people were talking about was the timeline. And Hyrule Historia came out, a couple of years later in 2011, and then people just kind of stopped talking about timeline theories and they stopped debating it. And there's so many things where I'm like, I don't think we were there. Like, I don't think we're done. And games kept coming out. And
Yeah.
so I was so excited that like people just, through your video, kind of spurred this discussion of like we're talking about the timeline again. I'd love to kind of get into some of the specifics about your timeline and what you're thinking.
For sure.
But I'm just glad you made it.
Yeah, it was a fun video to make. The first video game that I ever was like old enough to recognize was actually coming out was Skyward Sword. So it was right when the Hyrule Historia was coming out. So like I would talk to my brother-in-law and he tells me this story of like, oh yeah, before before the Hyrule Historia, on like internet forums, people were trying to debate the timeline, put it together, and I never experienced that. Uh, but I still liked Zelda lore a lot. And then Tears of the Kingdom came around, and the placement is so strange and ambiguous that I was like, hey, let's crack that open again.
Hmm. No, I'm really glad you did because I've heard a lot of different discussion about Tears of the Kingdom, and especially because of its flashbacks. It's like a lot of people, seem to be okay with putting Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom at the end of the timeline, but now we have flashbacks, and it's stated in game that that's the first established kingdom of Hyrule. The Rauru is the first king of Hyrule. But what exactly does that mean? Does this mean that this is the first that flashback happens? Like before even Ocarina of Time? Could it have happened after the split? Is it a different kingdom iteration of it? I guess I'm curious. Could you kind of explain some of what makes your timeline unique compared to Hyrule Historia for those that haven't watched your video?
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you the very long answer to that question. So I hope you're ready, because I've been thinking about this ever since you mentioned that you wanted to have me on. But I watched a new YouTube video a couple days ago. I wish I could remember the name of the guy that made it, but he went into it and talked about how people fundamentally misunderstand the Zelda timeline. And they say that Nintendo doesn't care about the timeline. They never did. The developers are just doing stuff willy nilly. And he's like, well, that's not true. And he goes into the history of the the timeline, right? It's like you have the first Zelda game, then you have Zelda 2, which is a direct sequel, and then you have A Link to the Past, which is a prequel, and then you have Link's Awakening right after that, right? And they just kind of build this timeline out from the first game. It's always been there, uh, but eventually, I feel like what went wrong with the timeline is you have all of these games connected together, and the writers felt cornered. They were like, okay, well, everyone loves Ganondorf, right? And we want to put him into a game, but we've killed him off in every single timeline. So they just said screw it, and they decided to put him in a game anyway. And then of course it's a Zelda game, so you mix in a little bit of time travel, and it Tears of the Kingdom just gets into this position where it not only doesn't make sense where they're trying to place it in the timeline after everything else, but it's quite frankly just an impossibility to be where it is, especially with like the flashbacks. The existence of Ganondorf at all in the first place is confusing and frustrating. And so, kind of what I decided to do with my timeline is I was looking at it and I was like, a lot of the time we focus on like this detail, like, oh look, there's rock salt in the in Breath of the Wild. That means it has to come after Wind Waker. And I started to get really frustrated with that line of reasoning where it's like, okay, you're going to have a million different details all over the place and they're never going to line up perfectly. So I decided to take a step back and look at the timeline more as a uh, thematic puzzle piece, right? Trying to put everything together based off of the themes that the series is based off of. And so I completely reorganized it. Uh, so some of the key features of my timeline, I guess, is I got away with I just trashed the downfall timeline because I've never been a fan of the downfall timeline.
Thank God.
It's I feel like it's an alternate reality. Like it's not even time travel based, which like isn't a timeline, but yeah, it's semantics. And then the most controversial thing I did in it that I still get really angry comments about is I put Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom way at the top of the timeline, right after Skyward Sword. And I made some half-hearted attempts to explain that in the video. And I can go more into depth in kind of my line of reasoning. But ultimately, I just felt like it was more thematically appealing. It made more sense to put Ganondorf there and his rise to power, and then a completely separate Ganondorf later on, as opposed to trying to shoehorn it at the end of one of the other timelines. And like, yeah, it doesn't make the most sense based off of like purely evidence, but from a story perspective, it made a lot more sense in my mind.
Hmm. Well, I think some of that's not controversial, right? Like, I from the discussion that I've heard so far online, and I don't know, I haven't gone super deep into the Tears of the Kingdom lore, but like as a fan, I really wanted like to to be able to say like, all right, if Ganondorf's coming back, can it be the same one? But I don't know anyone that's actually defending it being the same one. I think most people agree that like if Ganondorf is back in Tears of the Kingdom, it's a either a precursor to the Ganondorf we know, probably a precursor, probably on that side of the timeline. I guess it could be like another reincarnation. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I would love for it to all like be cohesive and every other game with Ganondorf has the same Ganondorf. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's theorizing at this point that it's the same character.
Yeah, that was one thing when Tears of the Kingdom first came out. Uh, I remember just like sitting down with my friends and just trying to wrap my head around Ganondorf for like, but because because before it released, no one knew there was going to be time travel in the game. They didn't even allude to it in any of the trailers, and so that was kind of a big shock. And I think the time travel is what really messes with it because if there's no time travel in the game and it just takes place after Breath of the Wild, then yeah, I guess it could be one of the other Ganondorfs. Like you could say like, well, maybe Twilight Princess Ganondorf like got revived somehow. Uh, I think it'd be stupid to try and revive the Ganondorf from Wind Waker, just considering the themes of that game. But yeah, it's really the time travel that screws over the writers because they're like, oh yeah, it's the first Kingdom of Hyrule. It's like, why'd you have to say that? Like, what was the point?
Mm-hmm. Now, that's the thing about Tears of the Kingdom lore is, like, and I'll say out the gate that, like, I love the idea of, like, revealing everything that they did about the Zonai and the nature of, I mean, not that we get a whole lot, but I like what was revealed. I don't take a, huge issue with a lot of it, but there is a bit of a double-edged sword there with, like, it's revealed, but now it's even more confusing than it was when it started. But that's Zelda in a nutshell. And that's not new. For
Yeah,
every entry that there's ever been, there's been stuff like that, from the time that Wind Waker came out. And I remember like Link's age. Like I read a forum a while back where this was a debate because the whole idea in Wind Waker is that Link is the same age as the hero of Legend, but that
right,
takes place in the adult timeline. So the Link from their legend that they would recognize would be adult Link, unless they're also referencing his childhood acts. So either like the age of the hero has been changed over time, or Link is older than he looks in Wind Waker, you know, or they're recognizing Child Link's accomplishments. I don't know. Either way, lore wise, it's a mess.
absolutely. Uh, It's funny that you bring up that specific one. So one aspect of being a YouTuber on a specific lore subject is you just find yourself going down like the dumbest rabbit holes in existence. And I
Hmm.
made a video where I was like, "Oh, who's the strongest Link?" Right? And it was a short. I just kind of wrote it. Honestly, I didn't try that hard because this was when I had like 200 subscribers. And I was like, no one's going to see this anyway. It was my first short to just like blow up. And so a lot of people saw it. And I threw in a throwaway joke in it where I was like, even I could beat up a 10-year-old. And everyone got so mad because they were like, Wind Waker Link is actually this age, and not a single comment agreed on how old Wind Waker Link was.
That's
So
awesome.
I spent like the better part of a day trying to figure out how old Wind Waker Link is. And the conclusive answer is the developers don't even know. They're like, older than 12.
Hmm. That's as much as we know. It's anywhere between 12 and 18, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, I just thought that was really funny because like
Hmm.
it's just indicative of the franchise that we're working with is everyone kind of plays through these games and they create a head canon, and then they treat it like actual canon, and then you have these silly internet arguments over it.
That's the thing, right? And you're also dealing with implications and but I mean, yeah, like that's the thing is that the developers it's not that they don't care about the lore or the timeline or the story at all because obviously they do. They tell really meaningful stories. And yeah, I think I saw that video that you were talking about too. That was like talking about the Zelda timeline from when the games were being developed and released, and just the fact that yeah, like every time they made a new game, it was intentional that oh yeah, this is going to take place after this previous game or before this previous game. There was always that intentionality, but they were loose with it. They were intentional, but there's also they didn't care about getting everything right and consistent, and it makes it a mess when you try to put it all together. But I don't know. I also kind of respect that they're just going to make the games they want to make, tell the stories they want to tell, and I think that's maybe a lesson to us as fans is to recognize that sometimes. Let's what it's a little messy, but I think the stories are usually better because of that.
Absolutely.
Usually.
I think I think I agree with you. I think that playing fast and loose with the timeline allows them to have like creative freedom over a story. And I think that a lot of the time that's created very good stories.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I also think that some of the stories that were meant to be direct tie-ins to the franchise as a whole, for example, Skyward Sword was obviously like that's the Zelda game. That's like yes, we're connected to everything else. Like that was the story of it. And as I talk to people, that's many people's like one of their top 5 stories in the franchise. So I don't think it's impossible to do both, but I understand why they might feel restricted by trying to adhere to a timeline.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. I don't remember in your timeline video if geography was a part of it at all, but I know that that's a big thing in theorists where they try to like figure out is Death Mountain in one game is that the same Death Mountain from another game, and that's a whole mess because I'm like yeah, like it is right, but there's a whole branch of theorizing there, and it gets so messy,
Yeah,
and it's just yeah, I mean it's hard to make things fit. You just can't.
absolutely. I remember when I like 2 days before I reached out to you for the first time about working on like a stream together. I had just binge watched like 30 of your Wind Waker shorts, and
Let's
I was
go.
going through all of them, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty interesting." And then I pulled out my Zelda encyclopedia, right? Flip it open to the Wind Waker section. I'm like, I like because you said like, oh, Kakariko Village is right here next to Windfall Island, and I was looking at these things and I was like, is that canon? Apparently, yeah. And so I was really impressed with not only the modeling that you did because it looked beautiful, but also how how accurate everything was. It's like, yeah, like obviously it's not going to be you're never going to get 100% accurate on these kinds of things, but it was as close as you can get. So I was really impressed. That was my hyper fixation for the night.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you bringing that up because that's something that I still get comments where because I think it's confirmed as much as it can be that the Windfall is an evolved form of Kakariko. I'm trying to do my research here, but the issue is also that like in Ocarina of Time, Kakariko was directly at the foot of Death Mountain,
Right.
and in Wind Waker, um, it's just not like Kakariko or Windfall in the game is a mountaintop, and Dragon Roost Island is 2 quadrants away. There's a whole quadrant in between Windfall and Dragon Roost Mountain, and that's the whole thing. I think the Zelda Encyclopedia. That's one of those points where I'm diverging from it because I think it says that Dragon Roost Island. I think it says that that's Zora's domain or something. It's like, and Death Mountain ended up becoming what is it the Fire Island or Fire Volcano? I
Yeah.
forget what it's called. Right,
It's like
right
Mountain of
below it.
Fire or something. Something to do with fire, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. Where you get the power bracelets.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's just no way to make that consistent, right? It's like in one version of the map, the mountain's right there, and the town's still there, but the mountain's drifted, and that's the best we can do. So I'm trying so hard to be lore accurate,
Yeah.
but there's
Well,
just no way.
it just gets so tricky. I think that some of it you can like hand wave away because Ocarina of Time is split up into sections. The loading zones are sometimes meant to like imply large distances of travel.
Hmm.
So I think that you could make an argument like, oh well, maybe Death Mountain looks a lot closer than it actually is, just because of the hardware limitations of Ocarina of Time.
I'll
But
quote you
yeah,
on that.
you sure. I get a lot of hateful comments anyway. What's a few more?
Well, I'll blame you. It's I mean that's what it comes to. It's just like yeah, like ultimately the sizes of the maps are different, and it makes it easier to have something like Breath of the Wild where like its map is there's no loading screens between anything, and so
Yeah,
it makes it a lot easier to kind of say, well, this is the scope of the world, and if I'm trying to figure out how much space is implied between loading screens, like in Ocarina of Time, like I agree, I think it is ambiguous. Breath of the Wild does show you, well, this is how big the landmass actually is. So that's been a reference, even though like um, timeline wise, it seems like the developers may have intended. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll go with your timeline and say Breath of the Wild happened before Wind Waker, but but yeah, if they're not connected, it's still a good map to pull from.
yeah, I 100% agree. I Yeah, Ocarina of Time is just one of those ones where like it's so pi- pivotal to the series as a whole that a lot of the time people will like hyperfixate on Ocarina of Time and ignore some of the other elements of the Zelda games. Because like whether you're talking about just like game importance in general, like Ocarina of Time's obviously going to be really high on that list, or timeline significance, where it's arguably even more important. Uh, but then we start to like look at the things surrounding that, and I had a point, I swear, but I lost it along the way.
We'll find it later. You'll think of it.
Right on.
I do agree, though. Yeah, I mean, Ocarina of Time is a pivotal title. I guess I'm curious. That brings me. I have other questions that I've been trying to ask.
Oh yeah, go for it.
But I do want to ask. I guess just like, I guess this is. I'm gonna make this a twofold question. This is both how you got started into making videos on YouTube. I'd love to hear your backstory, as well as hearing like your backstory with the Zelda series, how you got into the games and what interested you, and yeah, just what got you interested in the series.
Um, I think the answer to both of those is being really young and having too much exposure to the internet. Uh, making YouTube videos has always been kind of a dream of mine. I've always really liked entertaining people, presenting things, and I've done that over like a myriad of different things in my life. Like in high school, for example, I did like speech and debate. I really liked being in front of a crowd, talking to people, and I learned to get pretty good at it. But then what they don't tell you is you turn into an adult, and suddenly no one really wants to listen to you anymore. So I was like, well, maybe if we venture into the online area of things, things will work out. And If you go onto my channel, I still have a bunch of like my really early videos posted, and they're really bad, uh, to the point where it's like, oh, like I didn't have any kind of microphone to work with. So I was just using my phone microphone. I didn't know what I was doing editing, but I was excited, and so I just kind of like made some stuff, posted it. Was like, oh, maybe it'll turn out. And eventually, I got pretty discouraged and gave up for a little bit. But then I had a bunch of really significant life moments over the course of a couple years. Like I got married was a really big one, and I was just kind of like talking with my wife, and she uh, was really encouraging me. Like she was like, "Hey, like you're really smart, you're really charismatic. Like I like you. Other people should too." And I was like, "Okay." And so I took uh, that belief that she had in me and applied it to my YouTube videos. And I was like, "Okay, we'll give it another shot. Just like one more try, and we'll see what happens." And the first video I posted got like 2,000 views, which like now looking at it like isn't crazy, but at the time like that was everything, and I just ran with it since then. I always knew I was going to make Zelda content for my YouTube channel because I I just know too much about the series to try to do anything else. I guess that leans into the second question of like how I got into Zelda in the first place. So I'm the youngest of 5 kids, massive family. I'm from Utah, so comes with the territory, I guess. But all of my siblings really liked video games, and they would play through them. And so I grew up watching them play video games, and I thought they were really cool, but I wasn't very good at them. But I would watch them, right? And Zelda is one of those games that you don't have to play in order to enjoy it. It's just as fun to watch my older brother figure out a puzzle and like give him suggestions. It's just as much fun to see him beat the crap out of a giant pig monster, right? Uh, and so by the time that I could get my hands on a game and actually experience it for the first time, it was like this huge build up and then a huge payoff. And that was Skyward Sword for me. It was the first
Mm.
game that I was able to see was going to come out, get excited about it coming out, and then play it when it did come out. And it was a blast. And then of course the Zelda Encyclopedia or Hyrule Historia came out around the same time, and so like everything just accumulated into one big moment, I guess, with that game coming out. And then add ADHD hyperfixation to that, and like you got a golden recipe for an obsession for the rest of my life.
That was a big moment, man. I remember there was that CD that came packaged with Skyward Sword as well. If you got it on the Wii, I don't know if you listened to that.
Oh
It's
yeah.
yeah, I got hours out of that.
Yeah, that one was great. They even did live concerts with that one,
That's
and
right.
my uncle knew that I really liked Zelda, and so he bought me and my cousin tickets to go see it.
Oh,
Dude, it was so cool. Uh, it was yeah. I don't know if they're ever gonna do a tour like that again,
that's
uh,
awesome,
but I highly recommend it if you ever get the chance to go see something like that.
man. I'd love to, man. I mean that stuff is just. I have so many fond memories with that album. And if there's anyone watching that doesn't know what we're talking about, they made a if you look up 25th anniversary Zelda Orchestra, go listen to it. You know, like I'm a musician. I do digital orchestral stuff. Like the stuff that I want to arrange, I want to be as good as as what they were putting on that album. It's just not only is it great Zelda music, but it's masterfully arranged, masterfully played and recorded. And so it's been great. I don't know how many scripts I've written to that music. So I recommend it to anyone watching that hasn't heard that soundtrack. Incredible.
It's honestly incredible. It still has probably my favorite version of Gerudo Valley on it.
Yeah, that is good. There's so many tracks, man, and like the Wind Waker suite. I just got a book recently. I play piano, And I just got recently a book of sheet music from the Symphony of the Goddess arrangements, which is what that album, of course, is based on, those arrangements that were performed live. And yeah, learning to play just that arrangement of that piece of music. I mean, part of Zelda's soul is in its music. I think that's true with, I think music is the language of the soul, if I may. And it's all kind of vague and kind of intangible. And so much of what makes Zelda great is, of course, like how well designed its level design is, and its puzzles, and its how well written its story is. But then its music, and there's something that, like, I think just stirs the soul there, and so it's all captured in that album. So I do recommend it. Want to make sure I'm articulating that.
Absolutely. It's
Hope I'm selling it.
it really is great. And I agree with you. I think that the music that's in The Legend of Zelda like breathes soul into it. Uh, just kind of a funny moment when I was dating my now wife. I had been dating her for like 6 months up to this point. I was like, okay, I think you're sufficiently in love. I'm gonna break it to you. I don't listen to normal people music. I listen to video game soundtracks, and I hope you're okay with that.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
but yeah, and then she listened to a bunch of them, uh, and yeah, it's yeah, that was funny. But yeah, an integral part.
It absolutely is, and I recommend as well. Like, I mean, because that's the stuff that I listen to, like when I'm driving somewhere, or I've been getting into the 8-bit big band. If you know them, they do a lot of video game music arrangements, a lot of, especially jazz stuff. With a lot of Mario soundtracks, and I guess I'm just music recommendations. That's part of this podcast episode as well, I suppose. That's awesome. I do want to ask. I've
Yeah,
been asking some of my guests recently, especially geared towards Tears of the Kingdom just came out. There's kind of been this zeitgeist in YouTube recently of like Zeltic just did like an hour long video. Um, what was the subheading? Like a flawed masterpiece, right? So
right.
the zeitgeist has kind of been like critiquing Tears of the Kingdom in the year since it came out. I love the game. I'm here to say like I really enjoyed Tears of the Kingdom, but I do want to kind of take advantage of the zeitgeist and ask, like, what do we want out of the future of the series? This is how I'm spinning the question. This isn't, I mean, if you want to bash the new games, you can. That's not necessarily what I'm here to do, but where do you want the future of Zelda to go? Do you like the direction it's heading? Is there something else that you want to voice about what you want for the future?
Yeah, for sure. I've thought about kind of what to expect with Zelda games for the future. I was gonna make some videos on it, but everyone else was doing it, and I was like, nah, they're doing it better than me. I can't I can't post something like that. Because I did watch the Zeltic video, and then Bandit Games also did like a rant on Tears of the Kingdom. As far as like how I feel about the newer games, I think they're great. Uh, I don't know if people are gonna disagree with me, but honestly, Tears of the Kingdom is probably the most fun I've ever had playing a Zelda game. Uh, in like very specific parts of the game. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've been on the internet long enough to know that not a lot of people agree with me on this, but I think Colgera is the best boss in the series. I like, yeah,
Ooh,
Colgera is easy, but I've never felt so cool fighting the Zelda boss, so I don't
it's
really
so
care.
fun.
Uh, and so I think that there are elements of the newer Zelda games that we should 100% keep around. I I think that keeping an open world is great, but I think that what the newer games lack that kind of hurts them is restriction, because they have this idea that they really want the player to be able to do whatever they want. But I feel like that kind of goes against the spirit of a Zelda game. Because if you go to some of the older Zelda games, you're put in a position where, okay, here's the problem you need to solve, and here are your limited tools that you have to solve it. And then there's a specific way you are supposed to solve a puzzle, and then there's usually like one or two other ways that you can get around it. Whereas with Tears of the Kingdom, for example, um, I just strap a bomb to my shield, and I've solved 90% of the shrines. And that was kind of a huge letdown for me, because like obviously I get to choose if I want to do that to complete the shrine. But I think that putting someone under restriction and forcing them to innovate in a situation is kind of what got me hooked on Zelda in the first place, and learning how to do kind of neat things. And I think Breath of the Wild had had a better balance of that than Tears of the Kingdom. So I guess in a future Zelda game, I do want it open world, but I want more restriction. I want to be forced to innovate under pressure. I want more enemies, and uh, I want to write the story for the game. So if Nintendo can give me a call, that'd be great.
If y'all are listening, I know y'all watch YouTube sometimes. I know y'all do because I've seen the way that y'all tweak or how am I supposed to say this? The way that they address criticism. There's stuff that they'll put in a new game, and I'm like, I saw that requested on YouTube, so somebody's watching the videos. So if they're watching this one, first of all, thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe. I'd love to have you on the show. Second of all, yeah, get him in the writer's chair. That's awesome. I totally agree with all that stuff, man. Especially like I mean what you're talking about, like I mean what those new games do well, cuz they do so much well. And I want to be clear, like just myself too, just that like I really do love these new games. I think it's some of the best combat in the series, and especially with what Fuse does. I want Fuse to stay in future entries. Like that's something that like, oh, that really worked for me. I do totally agree about level design. And I think there's so many reasons that not just the design in the dungeons themselves or shrines, but like the overworld itself. It's so easy to go anywhere you want, and I love being able to fly. I love being able to make machines. I love being able to climb anywhere. But that also means that you can pretty much kind of press your joystick in a certain direction, and it doesn't take too much effort to get there. And I really do think that that impacts, like I don't know, like class. I think about classic Zelda games and their overworlds, and there's so much that's gated off. There's so much that tests you. It's like, oh, you can't go there until you have a specific item, or the solution like kind of bottlenecks you into a certain path. And these new games are really close to having that because I can see in the overworld the way that they've sculpted out the terrain. They've created paths. Like this is stuff that they've thought about in the design, but it's still easy enough to cheese that you can kind of ignore the way that they've sculpted the map, um, just to kind of go about it anywhere you want. And I think that's something that like I guess like this is me as someone who's modeling a Zelda map project. Like I guess this is just like that's the way I think about it, but I can tell that like that's a really meaningful process, and it's so easy just to overlook the map design in some of these new games. That I mean that's really one of my bigger critiques. But I still love the games, and I mean that's how it is. I critique it, I love it. It doesn't mean I love it less.
Absolutely. I think that it's important to voice criticism of games, because no game's going to be perfect, and I think it is important to recognize flaws so you don't like double down on them in the future. But yeah, I agree with you. They are fantastic games. I spent like, I don't know, I'd have to check my logs, but probably well over 200 hours on Tears of the Kingdom alone. I don't even want to look at Breath of the Wild, but
Mm,
they're a blast.
I totally agree. I want to ask, not to um, open up the box too early, but I do want to ask, since you said that you're trying to get, I mean, like if you could, you would get in the writer's chair in the next entry. I want to ask about some of your ideas. I want to know where you would take the series for the future.
Ah, shoot.
Not to put you on the spot.
No, I definitely do have some ideas. I haven't like sat down and written out like, here's what I would do for the next story of the Zelda game, of the next Zelda game.
It would make a
Uh,
good video.
yes, so I've thought about making a video about that, and now that it's on the front of my mind, maybe I will do that. Because I already did. Here's my timeline. Here's my dungeon. Maybe here's the story would be the next successor. I think some things to maybe focus on in the next story might be, uh, like, let's get rid of Ganondorf for a story. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Ganondorf just as much as the next guy, and I may or may not be a little bit attracted to him, but I think that some of the other villains in the Legend of Zelda are such strong characters that it shows that you don't have to have Ganondorf for the story to work. Uh, take like Skull Kid, for example, fan favorite. Zant was also really good. And I think that removing Ganondorf from the equation does a couple of things for you. First of all, it gives you more freedom while writing a villain, so you can give them different motivations. You don't have to write the Triforce into the story at all if you don't want to. And additionally, you don't have all of these goofy timeline restrictions if you create a completely new villain. You're not trying to be like, okay, well, Ganondorf is in the story, but we've killed him off, 6 times now. So like, where do we put him? So I think that a new villain would solve a lot of problems and give a lot of freedom while writing a story. I would also like to see a Zelda game that tackles more mature themes, like Majora's Mask did with overcoming loss as like its main theme. I thought that that was really cool. I really liked Breath of the Wild as far as like theming goes, because the story is that Zelda failed, and the rest of the story is her like trying to grapple with that and overcome that. And I was a little disappointed that they kind of like trashed that when it came to Tears of the Kingdom. They didn't like expand upon it. They just wrote a completely new story. So I'd like a new villain, uh, a strong, mature theme, uh, and there's one other thing that's like in the back of my head, and it's like, yes, this other thing, it's not coming to mind right now.
Well, I look forward to hearing it maybe when the video drops, if I can give you some ideas.
Right on.
Well, that I mean, those are great answers, man. And I really I do hope to see all that. Oh man, I think about I really felt the same way that there were several things in Breath of the Wild that they started teasing, and then in Tears of the Kingdom, it's like, well, we're just not going to answer that directly. And I mean, we all want answers, and I get the Zelda games are going to come out, and they're just going to ask more questions than answers, and that's just how it goes. But there's stuff even about like Zelda and Link's relationship. I talked to my co-host, my regular co-host Alex, and I have talked a lot about that like Zelda and Link. There's a lot that's implied about their relationship. It seems that they shared a house even. What does this mean? And we'll never really know. The series is just never going to address that. Maybe in a future game, but it's a different couple at that point. So it's I don't know. It's like stuff like that where it's like I want to get to know these characters. I'm curious how you feel. Just speaking of story stuff too. Um, my personal opinion, this is just a little Joe trivia. I really want Link to talk. I want to pull the band-aid off. If not a voice actor, at least give him like dialogue in game, because I want him to have a personality. I get that he's supposed to be an audience surrogate, but like it's clear that like in different games, the writers want to give him a personality. There just hasn't been a convention of Link talking before, besides the animated show. And I want him to be a fully fledged character. I don't want them to, you know, um, to underdo it. I don't know what you think of that.
That's a good question. I think generally I've gotten really comfortable with Link not talking. So to hear him talk would be jarring. But that doesn't mean I don't think it could be done well. I think that if you're very careful with it, you might be able to. Perhaps we can finally get that playable Zelda game where you play as
Mm,
Princess Zelda, or it doesn't even have to be Princess Zelda, but you get to play as Zelda, uh, and then Link fills the role of dialogue, and Zelda becomes more of a quiet character.
that'd be cool.
I think something like that could be interesting. You could also kind of mess with some of the dynamics that have been established in the series and try and flip them on their head. Like, hey, like what if in this case Link gets the Triforce of Wisdom and Zelda has like the Triforce of Courage, and like you have to deal with a new dynamic there. What I will say about Link talking is I really hope that if they ever do choose to do it, they do not go the route of the cartoon or the CDI games. I don't think we need a wisecracking smartass Link. I think that we can just get along with like a good person kind of Link. Uh, I don't know, because it's a hard thing to balance, but I think that's too far in one direction.
No, I think so. I thought about this when I was hearing the. I haven't seen the relatively new season. I guess it came out last year, but I watched the first two seasons of the Demon Slayer anime. I don't know if you've seen that,
I haven't.
but I always felt like Tanjiro's voice actor. I was like, if they want to get a voice actor for Link, like I feel like he captures that, like everything from the games, and that there is there's an innocence there. You know, he's a young man and he captures some of that, but he is always like very steadfast and he's heroic, and I feel like that those are important qualities that Link would have. And I always felt like his voice actor, could do that effortlessly. Like give him dialogue, he could do it. It would have to be the right person though. And while I love the cartoon personally from the '80s, with the wisecracks, I definitely I understand and respect that the series has evolved since. That's not who Link is anymore, if it ever was.
Absolutely. I guess I don't want to like steamroll the questions that you have, but as kind of a segue into it, we know that there's a live action Zelda movie coming out
hmm
eventually. Uh, I don't think it's possible to make a Zelda movie without letting Link talk. I feel like that would be very difficult to pull off.
hmm
Maybe if you get the perfect actor to do it. But I'm curious what your fan casting is for Link in the live action is.
I've gone back and forth on this. I mean, there's. Hmm. I guess the fact is, I've gone back and forth on this. Um, to me, so far, the person that I felt like has done the best job, I forget the guy's name, but I don't know if you saw Godzilla Minus One that came out last year. But the main actor there, um, I felt like he did a really good job. I mean, I think that there are things that like would be smoothed over by getting an Asian actor for one, because there's things like when you Americanize it too much, you start getting into that Zelda cartoon territory. There's conventions in American acting, and I feel like if you're gonna get an American actor, you would want someone who can really be sincere, because there's a lot of Asian values in the Legend of Zelda and in what it means to be a hero. And I think there is a cultural component there that you want to make sure if you can get a Western actor, someone who can tap into that. Um, and I don't know, like I think there's examples where it works, right? I think about how successful the Star Wars franchise is, which is a series about these monks that are very influenced by Asian values in the names even, right? Like you have names like Obi-Wan and Anakin and Yoda, and these are very much Asian inspired names. So I think there's Western, you know, uh, artists that can make that work. I mean, we know Sony's producing it, but that's my take on Link. Is that like I think either tapping into just like I think you have to tap into like what is the original character of Link, what kind of hero is it being inspired by, and making sure that someone can do that. And what I'm worried about is if Sony's producing it, it's not a superhero movie. I know it's a hero story, but it's not a superhero story. And so I worry about that because that's not the kind of movie I want it to be. I don't know. What do you think about the movie? What's your fan cast?
My fan cast is to scrap the live action project and make it an animated show. But assuming that it has to be live action, I've thought about it a lot, and I've thought about making a video about this. Maybe I'll do it once we get another announcement about the Zelda movie. But um, time and time again, for someone playing Link, I always kind of circle back to having Timothy Chalamet play Link.
Mm,
And there's a few reasons. Don't just wait. There's a few reasons why I think that. First of all, I think that he looks enough like Link. Right? He's like a pretty slender, slightly androgynous dude. Right? Just like give him a blonde wig, he can play Link. Um, but what has really impressed me about Timothy Chalamet as an actor is how much respect he shows to the things that he's involved in. Because very frequently you get these big name actors who get really self-absorbed, really focused on like, this is my career. I'm the star of what's going on. Uh, but there's two things that I saw Timothy Chalamet in that really made me think, hey, maybe he would be a good fit. The first one was the Game Awards. I think that he not only showed that he is involved in this community of like video games and understands the culture of it, but he also shows a lot of respect to it, and I think that's really awesome. And then the second thing that I saw him in that I was like, oh, that would be really good, is I just saw Dune Part Two. It came out just a week ago now,
Hmm.
and Dune is like a super high fantasy science fiction, like it's nerd homework, right? And he was able to portray that so well. He took all the weirdness of the fantasy sci-fi genre in stride. And ultimately, it led me to the conclusion that I think that he would be really respectful of the role and he would act his little heart out on it. Um, do I think they're going to cast him as it? No, probably not. They're going to cast Chris Pratt, but uh, maybe it would be good to have Timothy Chalamet. That's kind of
I
my
think that's a
thought.
good cast. Yeah, I was I don't know who else. If you have to get like a Hollywood actor,
Yeah,
I'm okay with saying him. I don't want to say Tom Holland. I love Tom Holland.
yeah,
I know that people are joking that he's like the meme cast for who Link could be. I like Holland as an actor. He's versatile, and maybe I just haven't seen him in enough stuff. Maybe he could impress me. But I think that's the thing is like you have to let him take it seriously, and I've just seen him be so quippy, and I've seen him be like molded into like the safe actor,
yeah,
and I just don't want someone like that. I want someone who can just take the story seriously. I don't need it to be too like postmodernist, like like tell the story you want to tell, take it seriously. That's what I want from the movie, and who knows? I don't know if we're gonna get that or not. I don't have many expectations. Like I don't want much from it. I'll be happy. I think if it feels uncompromised, like whatever it is, as long as it's like if it's a story told with passion that honors what the series is about. I don't need it to respect the lore. Even it can do its own thing. It can change things. I'm okay with all of that. Like even if you were to tell me Joe the green tunic and pointy hat doesn't appear at all, I'll be like I could still be okay. I just want it to like take itself seriously. Ultimately, that's how I feel about it.
absolutely. I'm kind of going into it with the same mentality as the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, where it's like, you know, I don't necessarily expect it to be good. I think it's hard to take a video game and turn it into a movie. I'm not sure it was ever meant to be done. Uh, but I'm probably going to enjoy it because I enjoy the series.
Hmm. I totally agree. We're wrapping up on time. I do want to ask before we go if there's any upcoming videos that you want to plug, anything that you want to get the audience excited about, tell them about. Maybe by the time this video comes out, it'll already be out.
Yeah. Right now I'm working on a bunch of projects. So March is my birthday month, and I'm
Happy
trying to
birthday.
do. Oh, thank you. I'm trying to do a big push to try and reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of the month. So I'm releasing a short every day. I'm putting out a ton of community posts. Uh, but the culmination of it all is at the end of the month, March 30th. I don't know if this will be out by then. Uh, I'm going to be doing a big live stream where I'm going to be playing through Ocarina of Time, and people get to ask me lore questions while I'm playing the game. And if I can't answer them correctly, I have to reset. So
Ooh,
I think it'll be fun for me and the audience to get involved. So yeah, if this comes out on time, you should go to that.
that's exciting. Yeah, everyone subscribe to his channel. I'll put links in the description. Of course. Are you still doing the blindfolded streams?
Yeah, they're taking a little bit of a backseat just because I'm absolutely strapped for time this month. But probably
Hmm.
next month I'm gonna bring them back out.
Cool. For anyone that doesn't know, I was a special guest on an episode where you were blindfolding. You were blindfolded and playing through Ocarina of Time. I'm sure it was hard for you. I felt like it was the hardest thing I've ever done on a stream. Just trying to communicate. It's like, how do I tell you where to go in 3D space? Oh man, if I'm ever on again, I need to figure out. I need to study past episodes. I need to figure out how to coach you better.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on it again once we bring those back out.
Cool. Not to invite myself
No,
or
you're
anything. Just
already invited.
well, thanks, man. Well, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Without further ado, I'll let y'all go. Cut to black.